This is question number 42 from the 2013 KCPE maths paper. It says the graph below shows a journey by bus from town X to town Y and back. So this is a distance time graph, and on the y-axis we have a distance. So this distance here represents a distance from town X to town Y, and we're told that that starts here at 0 and it goes up to 240, and we're told that the distance is represented in kilometers. So this is 240 kilometers. And on the x-axis we're given time. So the time seems to go up in increments of 2 hours. So we start at 5 a.m. and we finish at 7 p.m. on the x-axis. But in terms of the actual time, we begin the journey, it seems, at close to 6 a.m. and we finish it at going to 7 p.m. Okay, and the question is, what is the average speed of the bus for the whole journey? The best way to attempt this question is to split the journey into parts. And the way we split it into parts is we look to see the slope of the line that makes up the graph, and when the slope or the gradient changes, we split the graph, and that's one part. So let's do that. So from the start, we can see that this slope is the same, but it changes at this point. So we'll split the graph here, and then again it goes and it's quite straight, and then it turns and it's a bit steep, so we'll split here. So we've already split the graph twice, and we'll go on like that. So we have one part here, a second part here, we'd split the graph again here, so that's the third part. We'd split the graph here, that's the fourth part, then we'd split the graph one final time here. So we have 5 different parts. So let's work out the distance travelled or covered by the bus in each of the parts 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So in parts, and we will do that by looking at where each of the parts end. So part 1 ends here, and we'll read across the time here. So in part 1, the bus driver covers 90 kilometers. So let's make a note of that. In part 1, the driver covers 90 kilometers. In part 2, the driver is stationary. The driver just stays at the same point the whole way. So the driver covers 0 kilometers in part 2. In part 3, the driver goes from a distance of 90 kilometers from X to a distance of 240 kilometers from X. So by the end of the third part of the journey, the driver is at town Y. So the distance covered by the driver in part 3 will be 240 minus 90, which is 150 kilometers. How about in part 4? In part 4, the driver is stationary. We have a horizontal line the same as in part 2, so the driver covers 0 kilometers. In part 5, the driver goes all the way from town Y to town X, and we know that the distance between town Y and town X is 240 kilometers. So the driver covers 240 kilometers in part 5 of the journey. So let's sum these here to find out the total distance travelled by the driver. And let's call this total distance D. So we have 90 plus 0 plus 150 plus another 0 plus 240. And when we add that, that gives us 480. We know that the gradient or the slope of a distance time graph gives us the speed, and that means that speed is equal to distance divided by time. To find out the average speed, all we need now is the total time the driver took to complete this journey. So we know that the driver started at 6 a.m. and finished at 6:30. It took 12.5 hours. So that means that the time for the journey is 12.5 hours. So that means that to work out the speed, we're going to do 480 divided by 12.5. So let's do that. That's a long division. So how many times does 12.5 go into 480? Well, 12.5 multiplied by 3 is equal to 37.5. And if we multiply 12.5 by 4, we'd get 50. So that tells us that 12.5 goes into 480 at least 30 times. So we'll write a 3 here in the tens column, and then below we'll subtract 375 from 480. And when we do that, we get 105. Next, we'll ask ourselves, how many times does 12.5 go into 105? Well, we saw before that 12.5 went into 50 4 times, and since it goes into 50 4 times, that means that 12.5 goes into 100 8 times. So we'll write an 8 here next to the 3, and we'll write 100 below. And then let's subtract 100 from 105. That gives us a 5. How many times does 12.5 go into 5? It doesn't. It's smaller, so it doesn't go into 12. It doesn't go into 5 wholly. So we'll put a decimal place here, and we'll write a 0 at the end of 5. Then we get something a lot more familiar. We get a 50. We know that 12.5 goes into 50 from before 4 times. So that gives us an answer of 38.4. So we know that the average speed of the bus for the whole journey is 38.4 kilometers per hour. The answer is A.